So, good morning, everybody. I'm Clive Brady. I am the chairman of the BWA, and welcome to this BWA HMRC post-EU exit webinar. So, we thought this would be a great opportunity. Now we're into February and into the new year, well into the new year, is that we would gather with as many members as we could, along with HMRC, Mark Gilmore and his team, to just reflect on where we were post-EU exit, and to obviously, if we've got any direct issues or questions, which I know as members we've been put into or filtering through Graham Sheen, our secretary, who I think, Graham, you've passed those all on to Mike and his team, haven't you?
Yeah, so we did go out prior to this meeting and ask everyone to share any issues that they faced after Brexit. A lot of you came back and gave us some of your scenarios that you faced, and we have passed those on to HMRC, and they've tried to incorporate everything into this presentation.
Okay, great. So I think if everybody can see the screen, this is the agenda for today. So as we know, a brief intro from myself, and then Mike will be giving us an excise. That's Mike Gilmore will be giving us an excise update. Dave Pruden will be giving us a PVA, that's a postponed VAT accounting update. And then we'll have a Q&A session, which I think, Mike, we're saying it probably 30 minutes going through the slides. But then, a general Q&A session, picking up not only on excise matters and VAT matters, but also from a customs and a TSS, and hopefully Dave Viali and Holly West are joining us to be able to respond to any questions or issues that have been raised already with or via Graham. So welcome everybody, as I say, and let's make this as interactive as we can once Mike and Dave have gone through their schedules. And then we can pick up, on the Q&A and really deal with any issues or questions that you may have. So, Mike, if you're there, hand it over to you.
Yep. Thanks, Clive. So I'll just load up the slides that I want to share, and hopefully everybody can see those.
That's great. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Brilliant. Okay. So thanks everybody. For those of you that have not met me before, I'm Mike Gilmore and I work in HMRC, and I'm the policy lead for Excise in relation to EU exit and what happens after we've left the EU. So what I'm going to talk about is, first of all, just do a quick recap in terms of what leaving the EU and the end of the transition period meant for Excise in relation to Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and things like parcels and passengers. And then I'll just talk you through some of the things that have happened since the end of the transition period, where we are with things like legislation, IT systems, and some of the issues that we are working through, and also just talk about some of the things that we will be working on over the next few months and some of our priorities. If you've got any questions, if you can wait till we get to the end of this, we can pick those up in the Q&A session, if that's okay. So unless there's anything to start off with, I'll get going. As I say, first of all, I'll just do a quick recap in terms of what EU exit means for Excise. As you're all aware, we've got different policies and processes in place for Great Britain and for Northern Ireland as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol. We'll cover Great Britain first, on what it means in relation to the end of the transition period. And what happened was that basically the rest of the world processes that we had in place for before the end of the transition period now apply in relation to any imports and exports of excise goods from the EU. So what does that mean? It means that if you're bringing goods in from the EU into Great Britain, you need to do an import declaration on the chief system. And similarly, if you're exporting goods from Great Britain to the EU, you need to make an export declaration, very similar to what you would have done if you were moving goods to the rest of the world before the end of the transition period. When you're bringing goods in, you have the range of options that are available to you in terms of being able to clear the goods at the frontier or to put them into things like customs warehousing or excise warehousing. And we continue to use the EMCS system as a domestic system for moving goods and controlling goods internally within Great Britain and the whole of the UK, and that includes moving goods from the port inland. So if you're importing goods into Excise warehousing, you would need to make your import declaration, then you would need to use a registered consignor to get the goods onto EMCS to move the goods to the warehouse. As I mentioned, different rules for Northern Ireland, which will come on a little bit later on. In terms of our domestic rules on things like production of excise goods and the holding and movement, no real changes in relation to those, although there were a few things that we did do in relation to things like premises guarantees, where we have relaxed the rules on premises guarantees, where the default position is no longer that you have to have a premises guarantee for a warehouse. We only apply those if necessary. We'll also continue to use the excise drawback system for any excise goods that are not consumed within the UK. So we still have the drawback system. And the other thing just to mention is that whilst we reverted to these processes for excise goods, we didn't for all goods that were imported and exported from to and from the EU. We have a system of what we call stage controls. So for controlled goods, including excise goods, we have the declarations that were required from the 1st of January onwards. But for standard goods, so non-excise goods specifically, we have this situation where for the first 6 months that we are using, in effect, what we call interdeclarants records, that you only need to keep a record of what goods you are bringing in, and then you have after the end of that period to submit a supplementary declaration to record the details for those goods. So we've got this in effect 6 months grace period for standard goods. We also had what we call an issue regarding goods in flight, and these are movements that started before the end of the transition period. And as you will hopefully remember, we had an agreement with the EU that those goods that start the movement before the end of the transition period would continue to run under the rules that were in place. So if goods were on EMCS before the end of the transition period and the movement that started, they would continue under those rules, and there would be no need for any import or export declarations in the UK or in the EU for those goods. That's still the situation, and that will continue to operate until the end of May, when the rules regarding goods in flight and separation issues will come to an end, and hopefully all those movements will have concluded. To allow us to get to this position, we had to implement a series of IT changes to particularly the MCS system to make it a domestic system for Great Britain movements, but keep it open for EU movements for Northern Ireland by introducing the Excise indicator to separate Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. And we also had to change some of our other systems, things like the ATWD and the RED system. So that was the position for Great Britain. We also had some policy changes in relation to passengers and parcels. For parcels, any parcels arriving from the EU into Great Britain, again, would follow the existing rest of the world rules. So that would mean that any excise duty, along with any customs duty and import VAT, would be due from the recipient, and that would be collected by the parcel operator, such as the Royal Mail or a fast parcel operator. We also had changes in relation to the rules for travellers from the EU to GB. We removed the system of unlimited amount of duty paid goods that you could bring in from the EU, and instead we introduced inbound duty-free allowances similar to what we had for travellers from the rest of the world to GB. We did increase those allowances for alcohol. In some instances, we quadrupled those allowances, kept the tobacco ones the same, although we did introduce a new rate for heated tobacco products. And we also introduced the scheme of outbound duty-free sales. So anybody travelling from GB to the EU could purchase duty-free on exiting the UK, and we extended that to rail travel, so people travelling via Eurostar or via Eurotunnel. And then finally, you'll remember we had a slightly different process in relation to Northern Ireland, because as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol, it meant that Northern Ireland would remain subject to EU excise law and the systems and processes that were in place to administer that law. And what that meant for Northern Ireland is that for goods moving between Northern Ireland and the EU, they would continue as they do now in relation to the processes that we have, so they could continue to move under EMCS or under the duty paid processes that we had. In relation to movements from Northern Ireland to the rest of the world, so imports and exports to the rest of the world, those would continue as they did now. Similarly, any internal movements would continue as they did, and any movements from Northern Ireland direct to Great Britain would continue. So there'd be no export declarations on leaving Northern Ireland or no import declarations on importation into Great Britain. The thing that would change, though, is movements from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And whilst we would continue to use the MCS to move duty suspended goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, we would also now have to complete customs declarations on importation into Northern Ireland because of the requirements of the Union Customs Code. So what we did is we identified all the different types of movements, not just direct movements, but indirect movements and complex movements, and we published guidance in terms of how all those will work. We also introduced what we call an offset mechanism, and this allows any excise duty that's already been paid in the United Kingdom to be offset against the new excise charge on entry into Northern Ireland, so that in the vast majority of instances, businesses would not have any additional excise duty to pay. So we've introduced that, we've introduced guidance to underpin that. And we also introduced similar rules and concepts in relation to passengers travelling from GB to Northern Ireland with excise goods and parcels moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And in relation to parcels, we have fairly recently published some additional guidance in terms of how that process, and particularly the offset mechanism, works for excise parcels from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. So those were the policies that we introduced at the end of the transition period. As I mentioned, it did require quite a few changes to IT systems, the main ones being to EMCS. On the whole, those IT changes were implemented successfully, particularly on the GB side, where we didn't really encounter any issues at all. There were a few issues in relation to the new XI code that was introduced for Northern Ireland. Most of those were minor issues and were fixed within the first week or so of January. There was one long-term issue, and this is in relation to Chief. Basically, this issue is the fact that Chief was not set up to accept XI codes, because Chief was originally planned to be solely used for imports and exports out of Great Britain, and CDS would be used for Northern Ireland. But because a number of businesses had not yet migrated over from Chief onto CDS, there's still quite a few of them that are using Chief on moving goods into and out of Northern Ireland. But because Chief was not able to accept the XI code, we had an issue particularly with matching exports to EMCS movements. So we do have a manual workaround in place to deal with that, and we will be hopefully addressing that as part of the future IT changes. So that's the only real long-term issue that is still being worked on. All the other issues have been addressed. There is some guidance on the EMCS known issues website that explains all the different issues that we had and the fixes that were put in place to deal with those. So if you do have any other issues with the EMCS systems, please let us know and we can make sure that we get those sorted out. We are now working on release 2, and this is the further changes that are going to be needed to EMCS. There are 2 sets of changes that are going to come in. The first one is in May, and this is in relation to goods in flight, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. So at the moment, we have this agreement with the EU that goods can continue to move on EMCS that started their movement before the end of the transition period. That has until the 31st of May to work its way through the system. From the 31st of May onwards, we will then be closing down communications between Great Britain and the EU, so that because all those movements should have worked their way through the system. So that is the main change that's going to be coming in May. It is the closure of the communications between the GB EMCS system and the EU EMCS system. We don't expect that this is going to have an impact on third-party EMCS systems, because it is really just the communications between the EMCS core system and the EU systems. So we don't envisage that third-party software developers are going to have to make any changes as a result of this, but we will keep you updated on this. But then there will be some further changes that will be introduced later on in the year, and this is to close down all the open movements that we have on EMCS. And again, we will provide you with more information as we work towards releasing those changes. We're also starting to look at the next upgrade of EMCS, because as we mentioned, Northern Ireland is still subject to EU systems and processes, and the EU is planning to upgrade EMCS in 2023 for it to take on all duty paid movements. So the processes that we have for movement of duty paid goods, things like the SAAD process, that will all become digitized and be completed on the EMCS system. So we need to start considering what that means for the UK, because Northern Ireland will need to implement that. So that again is one of the areas that we will shortly be turning our attention to, the development work needed for the next upgrade. There's also quite a few legislation changes at the end of the transition period. There were a number of excise pieces of secondary legislation that were laid. We have got a slide a little bit later on where we can give you the links to all those legislation. Those were to implement the changes needed for the end of the transition period, and all those pieces of legislation came in and were successfully implemented. There was a debate on one of the excise pieces of legislation, which was the Travellers Allowance statutory instrument, as a result of it being prayed against by the SNP. And you'll have probably seen there was a debate and vote in the House of Commons, which the government won, so that SI is fully implemented as well. We do have potential for what we call a mop-up SI, where we will use that to address any issues with the legislation, which we laid at pace, and we didn't go through the normal process that we would normally have in terms of consulting and sharing draft legislation and being able to identify and rectify some of the issues. Because of the speed that we had to work to, we accepted that there might be some gaps or some issues. We've not identified anything major at the moment, just a few minor things that need to be addressed, and we will pick those up in the mop-up SI, which will be laid, as I say, probably around the May or June time. We will let you know details of those things that need to be picked up in that SI, and we will hopefully share that SI ahead of it being laid. In terms of guidance, we did quite a bit to update all the various pieces of excise guidance. So all the public notices, for example, were updated. We are at the moment what we call dual running. So the old versions of the notices are still available on gov.uk, and the new versions that all apply from the 1st of January onwards are also available. We will at some point take off the older versions, but we will let you know when we are planning to do that, just in case you want to keep ones for audit trail purposes. We have received some feedback from our internal stakeholders and also from external businesses, and we are updating the content as a result of that feedback. So again, if anybody does have any questions or issues around some of the excise notices, please let us know and we'll make sure that those are addressed. We've also updated our guidance on gov.uk, and we've created some new guidance. As I mentioned earlier, we have some new guidance on Great Britain to Northern Ireland parcels and how the offset mechanism has worked, and we will continue to roll out new guidance as and when it is needed. So again, any feedback that you have on that would be great. We've also updated all the excise forms so that they are available in the new end of transition period format. So for example, the ones that cover EU processes are still available for those businesses operating in Northern Ireland, but no longer for GB businesses, and we've updated them accordingly. And we've updated some of our other forms like the W forms as a result of exiting the EU. We're also going to be updating our operational manuals, which are also available through gov.uk. We've completed an initial trial of those and identified what needs updating as a result of the end of the transition period, and we're aiming to have those completed and fully updated by the end of February. Again, once that's complete, we're more than happy to share the details with you. So what I've included on the slides, and happy for these slides to be shared, is a link to a number of things. The first thing is all the legislation that was laid that impacts on excise. So it's got the statutory instruments, a mixture of the ones that were laid for no deal, which we commenced, and some of the new SIs that were laid in relation to, for example, Northern Ireland, and for travellers allowances, and for tobacco track and trace. We've also put a link into the Taxation Post-Transition Period Act, and we also got links into the main pieces of excise guidance on gov.uk. So the pieces around moving goods to and from the EU, the Northern Ireland guidance, including the new bits on parcels, and a link to Notice 197 and Notice 207, because those were the two notices that were most substantially updated. So those are there, and you can use those to access that legislation and that guidance. So that's it for me in terms of excise, in terms of what the policies are and what has happened since the end of the transition period. Before we move on to Dave Pruden, who's going to talk you through some of the changes in relation to postponed VAT accounting, I am happy just to see if there are any clarifications in relation to the presentation. We can park the questions to the Q&A bit, but if there are any clarifications in terms of anything that I've said that people just want me to go over or to expand on, I'm happy to do that before we move on.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Graham, have we got any observations, questions that have come in?
We did have one from Hugh, and he's just saying that we have an error on an EMCS movement to Germany, which was sent prior to the 31st of December, which won't be receipted. He says we can't change the destination now to bring back on EMCS. So how do we resolve it?
Yes, this was one of the issues in terms of what we did agree with the EU on separation issues, that we could not do change of destinations unless that change of destination was going, say, from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. I think the process that you have to do in relation to those goods is to bring them back in to the UK as an import into the UK and then redispatch them. Unless the Germans can come up with an alternative mechanism, that's the policy position from the GB side. Okay,
thank you, Mike. If anybody's got a question at this point, observation as Mike is requested, if they could, put their hand up, use that facility on Teams, then we can pose any observations or comments to Mike now. If not, then we can come back to that, can't we, Mike, in the Q&A?
Yep, session. Absolutely. Yeah, yep.
Okay, there's nothing for now, so press on. Okay,
so well, that's it then from me. So I'll hand over to Dave Pruden from HMRC, who's the lead on postponed VAT accounting. And Dave, I think you've got an update that you want to give on postponed VAT.
Yes, thanks very much, Mike. I think before I start, I hope the connection holds up. I noticed that it might be on my side that might cut out once or twice. So let me know if this becomes impossible to hear. And apologies. Any slides to support this? I didn't quite have time to do so. But yeah, this is provided some information, I think, last year in respect of postponed VAT accounting. But from talking to Brian and Graham from yourselves, realised that the guidance which is currently out there on gov.uk and as described by Mike just now, it isn't comprehensive. The guidance hasn't all been updated to the extent necessary to meet all potential users, and particularly in the context of what I'm about to talk about, the guidance isn't there at the moment to particularly tell an excise warehouse the procedures that they will need to make with the introduction of postponed VAT accounting from the beginning of the year. So I'll go through some of that now. But to say as well that what I'm describing, we will be in the process of sending letters out to appropriate audiences to provide this information. This can be relied on. We will include links to published material that exists, not be where you would normally look for it yourself. It's the guidance is included on the notes for completion for the supplementary guidance notes for completion for goods removed from excise warehouse. Would normally be something that the warehouse keepers would look at and not the owners of the goods themselves. Longer term, we will be updating the relevant guidance. So that's particularly notice 702.10 tax warehousing, which is it's VAT guidance, but also make sure that the excise notice and other relevant guidance, including the postponed VAT accounting guidance itself, is also updated, so that there is comprehensive links for for wherever yourselves and owners of goods in warehouse may choose to look. They will be sent to the right place. In the meantime, what letter can be relied upon, and that should be coming and reaching you in the future. So just to summarise what's changed, but it's also then worth describing where things are actually unchanged, because there is a relationship between the two. So from the beginning of 2021, postponed VAT accounting has become available for all imported goods, which are so it applies to all imported excise goods, and it includes those that are released from duty suspense on or after the February 2021, and that includes those that have entered GB from the EU after or from the 1st of January under customs rules. So if the customs procedures existed when the goods entered the GB, then postponed VAT accounting will be available. So accounting for import VAT on your VAT return means you can declare and recover the import VAT on the same VAT return. You don't need to can recover it later, as would normally be the case. So the operator, in the context of removing goods from an excise warehouse, the operator is required to make the ATWD declaration. Because the system isn't sophisticated, at the moment we're having to make do with existing functionality. We have to use the existing acquisition VAT functionality. So you have to enter the ACQ VAT in the amount of VAT box in order to use postponed VAT accounting. Now, because you're using the existing functionality, you do not get a monthly postponed import VAT statement as you ordinarily would if you were using postponed VAT accounting. So you need to make sure that the information that is entered into the ACQ VAT box is retained, so that you know how much VAT to calculate the VAT, and so you know how to complete your VAT return. But as I said, I refer back to what the current procedures are, and also some reference to Northern Ireland as well, because obviously things are slightly different for Northern Ireland. But essentially, there is no change in respect of goods which are produced in home-produced goods. And there's no change for EU to Northern Ireland acquisitions. Acquisition VAT will be accountable in the same way as it was prior to the 1st of January, where when the goods, the existing rules also apply if goods change ownership within warehouse, which is that acquisition VAT in those cases is extinguished, and you instead account for UK supply VAT when the goods leave the warehouse, with the VAT being accounted for by the final owner of the goods when they leave warehouse. That's not changed. That was always the case. So if if supply VAT is accounted for when the goods leave warehouse, you still get C79 certificate. It's a bit it's not necessarily what you would expect, because effectively, if you use postponed VAT accounting, it means the only circumstances where you will get a C79 in future, an import VAT certificate, will be for UK home produced goods. But that is how the system works, and you will get that document, and it will still be used as evidence for claiming input tax on your VAT return. So essentially that's the as-is position summarised. A couple of transitional points, and again, this is the guarantee, and this is in the letter. So if goods arrive in GB from the EU before the 1st of January 2021 in duty suspense, they will remain subject to acquisition VAT when they are removed from excise warehouse on or after the 1st of January. Again, unless they changed ownership within warehouse. And goods imported into GB or Northern Ireland from outside the EU before the 1st of January, so something which went through customs procedures before the 1st of January, when those are removed from excise warehouse on or after the 1st of January, then postponed VAT accounting is available. And finally, just a general point, because I know it's come up before, you can get obviously different types of removal from excise warehouse on which separate forms should be completed. Most clearly, you may be using the ACQ VAT. You may need to enter ACQ VAT as described the box. As I said earlier, that may mean actual acquisition VAT in some cases, or it might mean postponed import VAT for other removals. So you should complete different forms when removing those goods from warehouse. And that works for the online ATWD service as well. I know there's been some talks that you should try and put everything on a single document. No need to do that, and indeed you shouldn't. You just complete consecutive forms with consecutive reference numbers, and that should, and that means you'll be able to account for acquisition VAT for the removals which are subject to acquisition VAT, and then a new form where you'll be able to use the ACQ VAT entry for imported goods on which you will be using postponed VAT accounting. I think that's in essence what I had to say. That information will all be visible to you when the letter arrives. But happy to take any questions in the meantime on this, or anything more widely on postponed VAT accounting.
Thank you, Dave. We lost you once or twice along the way there. So are there any questions from anybody? Again, use the chat facility or raise your hand, and then we can obviously take you off mute and ask Dave directly any questions. Graham, have we got anybody posted a message chat or a message question rather?
No questions so far.
Okay.
He says, as one came in.
As one drops in.
Yeah, Neil Rayner, let me just unmute you, or if you can unmute yourself. You've got a question.
Yeah, it's just a quick thing really. We're with obviously reading through all the notifications of PVA, it says obviously when it comes in for customs goods, it would actually be on the customs declaration. They would put in an identifier, I think it was G, wasn't it, in the method of payment, and that would identify that these were going to be PVA. But with excise goods, is that how as a bonded warehouse, we would identify that it would still be through the declaration and we'd do it there, or would it be more the client would say to us, we're doing PVA, and we would do it that way? So just obviously not being caught out, being a third party in this process.
Yes, so MOP G is used if more directly when the customs declaration is made. So in an excise context, if you're not putting goods in warehouse, you would select MOP G on your customs declaration, and that would cover the customs, excise and VAT, and you would be able to use postponed VAT accounting VAT. If goods are entering warehouse, then there, as actually is the same at the moment, there are CPC codes you enter which says the goods are entering warehouse, and the VAT isn't then accounted for when goods you're on the customs declaration itself. VAT is accounted for when the goods are removed from excise warehouse.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's the biggest thing. It was really just because obviously being the warehouse is just the identifier. I was more concerned about that we'd put it down as PVA. We just didn't want to be caught out to say, well, actually they haven't identified it would be PVA. So
yeah, that shouldn't actually be any different from the way it always was. You would always have entered the CPC code to say the goods were entering into warehouse, and that the VAT would not be accounted for in the customs declaration. It would accounted for removal from warehouse. So now you're in the situation where the goods are, the goods are removed from warehouse, and effectively what you get is the additional, everything you had previously, but also the additional option to use postponed VAT accounting for imported goods. And of course, I think you would want to use postponed VAT accounting when it's available, because obviously because of the very big cash flow benefits in doing so.
Yeah, obviously there's a cost with our changing our system, so we split all the different variants out. But yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for the question, Neil. Any others, Graham?
Yeah, so Kim Lee from DHL, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, it's to do with the MSS report. Just wondering if we need to subscribe for a separate import and export report for the Excise EORI.
Is that for Mike, that question?
I think that's possibly a customs one, I think, because I think is that more around EORI numbers.
Okay, probably.
Shall we, Graham,
So
do you want to capture that one?
Struggling to come off mute there. But yeah, as Holly says, we can take that one away.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions, Graham?
No, Lorna Davis is just asking when the slides are going to be circulated, and just to let everyone know, I'll get those done probably later today once the video is ready for sharing as well.
Okay.
So we'll get everything sent out at the same time.
Okay.
Just also to mention as well, as Dave mentioned in his chat on postponed VAT accounting, we have sent a letter out explaining the rules and the guidance on this. We've sent it out to JTCG members, so if you've not yet received it, you should be getting it fairly soon, and we're happy for that to be circulated around to all members as well, along with the slides. So you can include that letter as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I think we've posted that today, haven't we, Graham?
We did post one this morning. That was owners
yeah.
of goods in an excise warehouse. So
yeah, I think that's the letter, isn't it, Mike?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so which we thank Dave for. So yeah, we've made that available to members, so posted that. So that should be really helpful, which is good. Okay, if we've got no other questions then, specifically on VAT, do we want to go to that the general Q&A then to cover customs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be good. Graham, have we got any pre-lodged questions for this session?
No, because it was all revolving around the challenges that people were facing. But if anyone's got any questions, because we've got Holly West here, I know you're going to be covering TSS for us. And so I've just had one. Ronnie Reed, have you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. It's one from this morning. Can you hear me okay?
Got you now, Ronnie? Yep.
Yeah, we've got a number of entries going RoRo, and obviously the hauliers are cancelling these. And one question, first of all, is there any plans to make the assumed departure message on these RoRo entries less than 15 days? It's obviously 15 days at the moment. So I've got a number of these. The we've been waiting to see if the entries are going to go. They eventually go assumed departure, and we're trying to close them down because the goods never left our warehouse. I've been phoning and contact or talking to the National Clearance Hub, and they say they can't do anything because they've gone assumed departure. The only thing we can do is to fill in a C81 document, which is a trade statistics only document. So I'm concerned that our customer in 4 months' time is going to get a demand for excise duty and VAT because they're still at assumed departure and we don't have a departure message, and we're never going to get one because the goods never went anywhere.
So these are exports then, Ronnie, I take it?
Yeah, that's right, mate. Yep.
Yeah. So I think this is probably one of them for.
It's one for customs. Yeah, customs, I know. I know. It always seems to land in your desk, mate. It's not no, it's not your. I'm not getting at you. It's
no,
just,
no, absolutely.
It's somebody from customs needs to come on and answer and give us some answers on this, because we're going to have loads of these. I've just had a phone call there from one of our smaller customers who's trying to make his own export entries, and they can't actually find anyone to ship their pallet loads to Europe.
Ronnie, I'm just trying to get my head around this one because it sounds like there's quite a few moving parts to it. Almost, as you say, it kind of has it almost has an impact on the excise and VAT side of things, but that is caused by, you know, as you say, this the assumed departure.
Yeah.
From my side of things, I'm more we're kind of myself and Holly more look at the policy side of things. So I get where you're kind of saying what is the potential. The potential longer term, well, from our side, I think we'd be looking at, okay, what's the longer term policy solution to prevent this happening continually?
Yeah.
But equally, in the first instance, I think there's a bit of an operational issue here of how do we kind of fix the problem of those that are already in this situation, to make sure that they kind of remain compliant but don't attract you know that VAT and excise that obviously would be less than desirable and probably quite significant overall as a cost is concerned. Would you be able to, and I'm happy to share my email address in this, would you be able to ping an email to me that kind of outlines this as a bit of a case study, so I can then highlight it to the relevant both operational and policy teams to kind of jointly consider how do we fix the problem at hand, but also is there a change we need to do more fundamentally to prevent this kind of continually happening? Because I can imagine it's
going to happen. It's happened.
Well, it's happened already. And it's going to happen. Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess it's that two things. How do we fix what's already happened, and how do we prevent it happening again?
And if the assumed departure entry is going to go from 15 days to 5 days, now I'm not sure that's actually a case, but somebody mentioned this and I picked it up from somewhere. You know, when we send our small orders out, they go to a consolidation warehouse. They take a week before they get a lorry ready to go. So everything's going to go assumed departure before it even hits the Ro-Ro port. So it's going to be, this is not something that's going to go away. And I'm quite happy to put it down in an email if you give me your email.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll ping that because it's not a simple one.
But to be honest, it is fairly simple. It is fairly simple. I mean, I'm contacting the National Clearance Hub with transit. I'm trying to use transit entries as proof of departure, and I don't see anywhere. I looked at the tariff and I didn't see anything in the tariff saying that transit was allowable. But anyway, I managed to get one done yesterday by using a copy of the transit entry and then going on to Europa, sticking in the transit order. Into the MRN into Europa, and then it tells me it went to Latvia, last Thursday or something, and then I just take a screenshot of that, send it to the Clearance Hub, and they've given a departure message on that entry. So, that's something where somebody's actually used their initiative and think, okay, Europa's saying it's at Latvia. It must have left the UK then and closed it down. And that's not necessarily
a workaround.
Yeah, and it's not in the tariff to say that yes, you can use the transit entry proof of export as alternative evidence. So yeah, let's be practical and try and get a solution for this.
Yeah, and it is positive to hear that there are some in the National clearance hub that are taking
Yep.
that pragmatic
But
approach.
it does depend who you get.
True, yeah, with that is across the board a bit of feedback. We have heard elsewhere about consistencies in our approach, not just to these kind of things, but across the board, you know, where as you say, depends who you get, you know, and it's not ideal at all with this kind of quite considerable change that's happened. You know, any inconsistencies just add to the confusion that perhaps is already out there as well. So it is, you know, that is an issue that, you know, across HMRC we are aware of and are trying to reduce as much as possible. But yeah, if you send that one over to me, Ronnie, I'll ping us. I'll pop my email address in the chat box.
Right. Okay.
Just because it's, as you say, it is a simple one in its essence, but quite often with these, the solutions to them, unfortunately, rarely are as simple as we'd hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Yeah, Ronnie, if you could you copy Graham in on that email to David?
Yeah, will do. Yeah,
yeah,
no
that'd
problem.
be great. And then you know, if we get if David is able to find a solution, then we can share that as well.
Yeah, no problem,
that's,
Clive. I can put one or two other things in there as well.
Great. Well done,
Thanks,
Ronnie.
Ronnie.
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent. And David, anything you can do on that to free up that situation will be gratefully appreciated.
Yeah, as I say, kind of to give a bit of context of where we are in the customer space at the moment, we've kind of got half an eye behind us and half an eye in front of us on trying to kind of work through and address the operational issues that exactly like this that have kind of raised their heads in the now I think we're at week 7, whilst also looking at, you know, okay, how do we fix these problems, but how do we prevent them becoming larger problems, and also when we're looking at the staging in of these customs controls, how do we learn some lessons from what's gone wrong or what hasn't maybe gone as perfectly as we would have liked from January to try and ensure July is as smooth as possible. But I will just post my email address.
Well, yeah. I mean, anything you can do to help, I think, you know, I mean, we've had kind of great support from Mike around Excise, Mike and Dave from VAT. I think what we'd all say, and certainly as an association, we've not had that support around on the custom side of matters. And I think if we can get that, then most of our traders' issues around the customs changes, as you would imagine, because they have been the most significant changes we've seen.
Yeah, definitely. What I'll also post in the chat is we have an email address that if you know you've got wider questions that you don't think of here, you know, I'll pick up on that one that Ronnie's raised. But if you kind of have more generic questions or equally for our stakeholder engagement team, of which me and Holly are a part of, we have like a central mailbox that tries to coordinate our attendance at various events. So you know, to try and address that kind of issue of trying to provide a little bit more support for this association, we can look at how we can do that going forwards, and as especially trying to make July as smooth as possible. I think, you know, as you say, it's getting you as much support as we can be critical.
Yeah. I mean, that's the next cliff edge coming, isn't it? 1st of July. So we need to try and make that as smooth as we can. So having engagement with you customs guys would be extremely beneficial, if not invaluable, to our members. So I think you know, we've had that on the Excise with Mike and had that on the VAT side with Dave. So we do need to do something not dissimilar on the customs side with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. So the email address I've just posted in there now is kind of, and if in doubt, feel free to email questions or suggestions to that email address, and equally feel free to copy me in, and I can help chase up on things and chase things through a little bit, because what we do have is kind of a team behind that inbox that does a bit of a triage process of what is the query relating. So if you had further meetings such as this, and you were looking for a customs presentation almost similar to what Dave and Mike have covered earlier, we can look to do something similar like that. But also, if you have technical questions, we do have a team who deal with technical questions. We can't provide obviously advice on what you should do, but we can provide a bit of advice, and you know, if things aren't working, you know, we have routes of escalation to raise that at with those operational colleagues who are trying to, you know, keep everything flowing as best we can.
Yeah, okay. No, that'd be really helpful. So we'll tap into that most definitely. That'd be good. Thanks. Graham, just conscious of time, obviously, we're scheduled to finish at 12, and I'm conscious again, Holly's joined us. So do we have any questions around TSS, which I know has been, you know, a topic of conversation in recent days and weeks?
Yeah, nothing in the chat at the moment, but Brian, Brian, you still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here, Graham. Yes. Before I sort of go on about the practical issues surrounding TSS at the moment, can I just ask, if Holly's on the call, is Holly in a position to deal with practical issues, or is she on the customs side with Dave Ballady?
I'm in the Northern Ireland Customs Stakeholder Engagement team, so I have to say I don't work in TSS itself, but I can kind of liaise with them and take back any concerns. I might be able to answer some questions now, hopefully, but I may have to take some away.
Okay, well,
TSS working questions.
Okay, just to give you a sort of what's going on at the moment, we've all gaily gone along using, well, we have a couple of carriers as a company who deliver our goods to Northern Ireland on behalf of our customers, and all seem to be working okay in as much as goods were getting into Northern Ireland and being delivered to customers. And then last week, you know, it all came to a grinding halt because it became clear last week, for the last month or 6 weeks, there's been real problems with the TSS system, whereby the transporters sending excise goods or controlled goods to Northern Ireland, so that should therefore be declaring them as controlled goods. The TSS system wasn't working correctly, so they were being advised by the TSS team to declare them as non-controlled goods. And now we're hitting a problem because they've been declared incorrectly. I got to a point on Friday where I actually went to Kevin Shakespeare, who was one of the team who instigated TSS last year, who's from the Institute of Exports, to make him aware of the major issue going on at the moment. And he, in turn, has put me in touch with a guy called Ian Humble, who I spoke to on Friday. And there's an acceptance that the TSS system isn't working in practice in declaring goods through the TSS system to go over to Northern Ireland. And the help desk is, I mean, I think if you phone up 4 different people on the TSS help desk at the moment, you got 4 different answers to the same question. To the point where people are actually saying, just do what you need to do to get the declarations through, and then we'll worry about it afterwards, which isn't the way that TSS, as I see it, should be working.
Okay, I'll take that away. I mean, I have to say we have heard that, yeah, there maybe are issues with some of the call centre and maybe the knowledge they need to have. There's different kind of releases of functionality of TSS coming out. I know there has been one, I think, due to come on the 28th to do with controlled goods. But I will take those. Yeah, I'll take those points away back to TSS.
I mean, to give you an idea, Holly, sorry, Roger, but to give you an idea, we use 2 transporters to get our goods to Northern Ireland. But on Friday, one of the 2 contacted us in writing to say, because of the problems they're having with TSS, they will not continue to take goods to Northern Ireland. And this is, I think, when you get to a stage like that, I think the matter is getting extremely serious, and something needs to be done quickly and practically to solve the problem.
Yeah, I'll take.
So go on, Holly.
Can you tell me a bit more about what exactly happens now for the things that you've declared as non?
What was happening?
Can I just confirm, Brian? Is it just with the excise goods that you've got this issue, or is it just movements in general on TSS?
It's obviously we're moving alcohol, where we're paying the duty. In the main, 99% of what we move is we pay the duty, given to the carriers. We provide all the information like commodity codes and weights and copy invoices and so on, so they can make the TSS declaration. And it seems at the moment the TSS system can't accept. So when they actually tick the box for controlled goods, the system isn't working to be able to accept things like commodity codes. So they're being told by the TSS team, don't worry, just declare the goods as non-controlled goods, which means that you don't have to make that declaration, the full declaration, and then we'll worry about the problem afterwards. So what's been happening, physically goods are getting to Northern Ireland because they get the release number from the TSS system, but now in reality, they've all been declared incorrectly, and it seems the TSS team don't really know what to do about it, either historically or how it's going to be resolved going forward.
Okay.
So quite a major issue, I would say.
Yeah, it seems like it is specifically on controlled goods then, rather than.
Absolutely, yeah.
It sounds like it, Mike. Yeah, control goods, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding of the latest kind of TSS release was that it was more, the release was more basically basically not letting you submit a declaration for a controlled good unless all the extra, again, boxes were ticked and paperwork was there, rather than it simply making it available, which should have been there from the start. So I will take that away and check back and get your response on that as soon as possible.
Just so you're aware, Holly, it's Ian Humby from the TSS team who's aware of the problem, and he's trying to sort it out at the moment, but it is a problem until it's resolved.
Okay, I'll maybe get in touch with him as well then. Thanks.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Holly. Kathy Thompson, Kathy, you've got your hand up.
It's just an example maybe for Northern Ireland. We were actually doing a entry, an ENS and a simplified frontier declaration this morning, and I thought the procedure code should be 0700, which, because the goods are going to an excise warehouse, but it wouldn't accept that procedure code. So we had to do it as another procedure code. We had to do it as 4000, which is the free circulation one, but to me it should have been 0700, but the TSS just wouldn't accept that code. I've
Okay.
sent a message, but nobody's got back to me yet from TSS, so I don't know. I think a lot of the problems are since the simplified frontier declaration information was added. It seems to be that some of it's not letting you put things in that you need to put in. If you fill in one box, it wants something in another box which isn't right. And there's one box where you go, I think it's litres of alcohol. You put in the figure and it says that it has to be, it gives you two warnings. It says one warning is that it has to be a whole number, and the warning underneath is that it has to be a number of something like 10 characters with 3 after the decimal place. So obviously that's a bit conflicting information.
Okay.
Okay, but taking Mike's point, this sounds to be specifically an issue with control goods then, doesn't it?
It is, Clive, yeah. I think
That's
what's
what we've
happening,
done.
Clive, to be fair, I think the approach from the TSS, which is a bit understandable. I mean, without being rude to the customs helpline, I think the TSS help team tier 1 is on the same level as the help desk from customs, in as much as I think they're trying to be all things to all people, and they don't really understand the problem. So what they're doing is just saying, if this solution is it will get through by saying non-controlled goods, let's do it, and then it's not a problem, not an immediate problem, but obviously it becomes one afterwards.
It will become one, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Holly, do you need anything in writing from us to help you take that forward?
So I have been taking notes, but I mean, if you are able to put that in writing, that would be greatly helpful.
Yeah, Graham, just make a note of that we can just put some detail behind that from Brian.
Yeah, that's fine. We can get that message sent over.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Mike, I'm just conscious of time. Really, we're kind of 4 minutes over now. I mean, do we? Are there any other questions, or shall we wrap this up and then we can maybe capture further questions that we can put to you and the rest of the team?
Absolutely, because we've got further catch-ups plan.
Yes.
So if you want to get any further questions or clarifications and get them into you, if you then share them ahead of the next catch up that we have, we'll make sure that we get those addressed and we can get back to everybody. Yep.
Yeah, and maybe as we've been talking, Mike, is that we have more specific webinars, you know, maybe on TSS, for example, or maybe on customs procedures, you know, specific matters, or maybe on VAT, as we've talked before about.
Yeah, absolutely. We can try and we can tailor these to any sort of announcements or major changes that we're doing. So happy for David and Holly, if they've got anything that any messages that they want to get out, you know, over the next few weeks, next few months, we can use ongoing engagement with yourself to get those out and do presentations. Yeah.
Okay.
That definitely sounds like a plan for me. And if you, and equally as, you know, I think it's a two-way thing here. You know, we're likely to have messages that we really want to make sure you guys have understood and have landed with you and that you're aware of. But equally, if you have specific topics that you think maybe a bit more of a deeper dive would be of benefit, that external custom stakeholder inbox, if you send a suggestion to that saying we'd like a call on X date covering this topic, you know, also feel free to copy myself in and we can look to arrange that. And equally, you know, one of the struggles that me and Holly sometimes face is we customs is a very large beast at times, and we're trying to cover off multiple bits of it. But what we can look to do is get the relevant colleagues that have more either operational knowledge or just more subject matter experts on those specific issues to help better get to the crux of the matter and answer your more detailed questions.
Yeah, well, that'd be really helpful, David, because as I say, you know, you know, we've got great support from Mike on, you know, on Excise and Dave on VAT. We need that on the customs side, and I think that's the biggest change in our sector that we've seen, you know, as a result of the 1st of January, and yet we've not had any, you know, no disrespect to anybody, we've not had that level of support we had on the Excise and the VAT side of things. And we need that as an association, and our members do as well. And therefore, by definition, that will help you, won't it?
I definitely agree, and it's something we're definitely keen to address, and you know, get that sorted and get all of you guys as much support as you need.
Well, maybe Clive, if we pick that up on our next catch up, we can explore, you know, what other potential topics might be ones that are of use and how we can, you know, keep that engagement going. So we'll pick that up on our next catch up.
And great. Mike, if it's helpful to have myself or someone else along to that catch up as well, we can kind of explore the art of the possible.
Absolutely, I'll definitely invite you to that as well. Thanks, David.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, conscious that we're 7 minutes over, but so thanks to everybody. Thank you, particularly obviously Mike, Dave, David, and Holly from HMRC, and thanks from everybody else for joining. I hope you got something out of that, and as Mike says, we'll have regular catch-ups as we go forward. That's the plan, but both from HMRC and from a BWA perspective. So look forward to speaking to you again, and have a great day. We'll speak to you soon.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.